because partially a lot of information is always gotten through social media. So we're having a lot of controversy between the government and people who allege that they are political prisoners. So today it is what we want to digest into do we have the political prisoners? Why are they being held? What are the charges? And is it legal or is it illegal for them to be held up to this time, actually, if they are there? Anyways, I'm being joined by Dr. Livingstone Ssewanyana, who is the Executive Director, Foundation for the Human Rights Association, and also he is under the United Nations. He is the independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. You're most welcome, Doctor.
Morning. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning to Doctor.
And good morning, our viewers.
All right.
I'm delighted to be here, the Family TV, for the first time.
All right. You're most
welcome.
Need
to thank the Church of Uganda Fraternity, and more particularly His Grace, Dr. Kazimba, for having had this wonderful idea of establishing this TV, and which I think is an opportunity for us to reach out to our fellow citizens.
Thank you so much, and you're indeed most welcome. So today we're going to be discussing justice for political prisoners and what should be done. So my first question is, do we have them? Because somehow, somewhere there is a controversy. The government is going to tell you this, and the people, I can't say those in opposition, are also going to tell us this. So do we have the political prisoners?
Allegations are rife about the existence of political prisoners. Of course, what constitutes a political prisoner itself is an issue of contention.
Okay.
For those, especially in the opposition, they think that those prisoners are there for political reasons. Others may argue, on the contrary, that they are there for having committed crimes. But whatever the case, what is most important is that any prisoner, whatever category he or she may be, has a right to access justice.
Yes. Okay. And now, if I'm to again ask, how about these false accusations? The government is saying we do not have them, and the opposition is saying you do have them, and they are having placards, they are having the faces of these people. Yes.
I think we need to go back to the genesis of this. I think it goes back to the 2021 elections.
Yeah.
As you recall, we had those riots, the infamous riots of 2020, whereby some people lost their lives, but there are those who were arrested. And since then, they have not been either brought to court or their cases have not been concluded. Some are under the civilian legal regime, where others are being held under the military justice system, which is the general court martial. Now, of course, we have seen quite a number being brought to court. For example, there are prisoners who were brought to the general court martial, and they made it very clear that they had been imprisoned for political reasons, and they demanded justice. We saw those being paraded. On the other hand, there are family members who have always claimed that they have among their families people who cannot be traced, and as such, you could argue that indeed they exist. On the other hand, we have, of course, government. At one point, they acknowledged the existence of these prisoners. You recall, I think the president came out at some point and acknowledged that there are people who had been arbitrarily arrested and they were in their custody. So they do exist. The question is how many, where are they being held, and why have their cases not been concluded? So as to whether they exist or not may not be a big issue. Of course, on the other hand, we also from the justice community have been arguing that those families whose members cannot be traced should come to us. And there are some who have actually come to us. And there are always legal remedies that are available for them. For example, if a family member cannot be traced, the law makes provision for you to apply for what is called a writ of habeas corpus. Now, a writ of habeas corpus is basically an order by court to the authorities to produce someone who is declared missing. And that right is very well enshrined in the Constitution under Article 44. So if you still have a family member who cannot be traced, definitely you can make recourse to this important legal provision.
Okay, and for them being there, because yes, since the government kind of affirmed, for them being there, is it legal? Is it legally right?
Their existence definitely would mean that they are not being lawfully held. They are arbitrarily held, because under the Constitution, once you are suspected of having committed a crime, you're supposed to be brought to court within 48 hours, and then the court will decide whether to continue with their hearing or subject you to further imprisonment, what they call a remand. Now, the fact that they still are in prison outside the required period, that means in itself that they are being unlawfully held. Now, of course, there could be several arguments being made around this. One could argue that, according to government, they are still investigating their cases. They have not concluded the investigations, but investigations must also have a reasonable time frame. Even the hearings must have a reasonable time frame. On the other hand, one can also argue that as of recent, the judiciary was not sufficiently resourced in order to conclude cases in a timely manner. But that matter is also being addressed. So the question is, should we subject their rights to those sort of positions? One would say no. They're entitled to a speedy, fair hearing, and the fact that they have not been brought to court, or their cases have delayed, that in itself constitutes a breach of their fundamental rights to access to justice.
And what is being done to this? Majorly, like you people who are in those positions.
The law is not very clear as to when you should actually have your cases concluded. Indeed, that is one area, or we call it a gray area, that we still are debating. For example, we have always argued that even when a person has been brought to court and committed to trial, there must be a reasonable period within which his or her case must be concluded. The law does not make provision for that, but generally under international law, we expect a speedy public trial, meaning that the trial period must be such that it is reasonable as to not cause unnecessary suffering to the person who is being accused.
Okay. We have had a lot of, I don't know if there are misconceptions or sort of, when these political prisoners, some of them, when they are released, the stories they tell, don't they create a gap in our system? Don't you think there's a big gap, according to the stories they tell, or if they are valid stories anyway?
Oh yes, there have been quite a number of allegations made by those either released or for one reason or the other have secured their freedom, that they have been tortured,
yes,
that they were dumped in places which are known, and that for one reason or the other they have experienced mistreatment. Now, in terms of the law, there is no gap as such, because the Human Rights Enforcement Act of 2019 makes it very clear that the rights of the prisoners must be held supreme, meaning that even during a trial, you must first take into account the rights of the prisoner. Let's say, for example, a prisoner comes and says, I have been tortured. The judicial officer is mandated and has a duty first to stop the hearing and first interrogate this particular matter to the extent as to uphold and ascertain the right of the accused person. Now, when they say that they have been tortured, that's a very serious issue. We have a law that makes provision also for that. The Prevention of Torture Act 2012, one can make use of that and sue the authorities for that. Now, what I think is the biggest challenge for Ugandans and for many people who find themselves in these situations is that they don't know the law, or they have no capacity to take advantage of the law. You can actually sue the state for acts of torture, mistreatment, and abuse, and secure redress. On the other hand, if you release this information, then of course we have a duty to campaign against such acts, being brought to a close. As you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a campaign against safe houses, and they were closed. But of late, we have had also cases of people who say they are being tortured in prison. We need information and evidence of that. We can actually proceed on their behalf.
But somehow, somewhere, don't you think the state is overshadowing the human rights agencies?
One, you need to know that what you call human rights agencies, they act within the realm of the state. You see, whether you talk about a national human rights commission or you talk about a non-governmental human rights organization, it operates within the remit of the state. Their role is to ensure that the state upholds its obligations. Now, whichever agency exists for purposes of upholding human rights, their fundamental role is to push the state to ensure respect for the rights of all and to ensure respect for the law. That is why, in most cases, we are calling for these particular people who allege to have been abused to come forward, produce evidence so that we can go to court and defend them and defend their rights, so that this abuse, this pattern of abuse can actually stop.
And by the way, when you talk of calling those who have had these cases, is it, can I call it fraud or sort of, isn't it also affecting your working? Because we have had issues where you find they are falsely, I can't say the opposition or the people, they are falsely bringing people who are not actually being held. Because I can testify to that. I had a cousin brother who was, we were with him, but we received a notification. See, his photo is being put that he is being detained. So how is that affecting your working?
You know, overall, human rights advocacy and human rights defense in itself is a risky business.
Oh.
Yeah, you put your life on the line.
Okay.
But it's for a good cause. And you are justified, and people are justified to put their lives on the line. What is important at all times is that the state must be held accountable for its obligations. And abuses in themselves an indication of a culture of impunity. If the state and its organs don't behave as expected, yet they are expected under Article 20 and Article 121 to ensure respect for human rights, then they are engaging in acts of abuse, they are engaging in acts of impunity, and that has to stop. Of course, we know that as a country we have been experiencing a democratic backlash, and it's because of this democratic backlash that we continue to have these allegations of abuse, that we continue to have cases of people being held inordinately. That's why we continue to have lack of redress for those who deserve that. And we must put a stop to this. That itself requires collective responsibility. Everyone must stand up and ensure that no one, under any circumstances, lives in a state of fear, or is subjected to threat, or is abused. And all organs of the state have been called upon to ensure that they live to their obligations. And the obligation is to uphold, protect, and respect the rights of the citizens.
Okay. So when we talk of these political prisoners having a fair trial or fair hearing, have you witnessed some of these cases?
Oh, we have had cases that have been brought to our attention, and we have even filed on their behalf. We have had families who have come to us and have said their loved ones cannot be seen. We have filed for writ of habeas corpus. So we have been to court, again, in defense of these people. And of course, some have been produced. There are still cases which we are still pursuing, but there are some who have been produced and even released. So we have been witness to some of these, of course, travesties of justice. But on the other hand, we also have been witness to some cases being concluded and justice being delivered.
Okay. Have you taken a step of finding out where these political prisoners are and what state they are in while being detained?
One, of course, what you call political prisoners, as I said, is also an issue of contestation.
Okay.
The point is that they are gazetted places of detention. Any other place of detention that's not gazetted in itself is an illegal detention facility, and such places are sacred places. Of course, there have been allegations of places around Kampala, and we have had to look out for those. I cannot tell you precisely that now there is this facility here or the other. In the past we could, you remember, like Kololo Summit View, there used to be a safe house. We were able to establish that. You recall that members of parliament at one time, having also had these Halloween cases, went out to search for these secret detention centers, and of course they never came out with a conclusive report. But what we know, and of a certain, that Nalufenya used to be one such facility, and it was closed. And there is the Chireka SIU. We have been there, and we have found that actually that is a regular detention facility. So, as to what constitutes a secret facility for illegal detention, that is an issue of sometimes guesswork.
Okay. And maybe also there is a lot of bad image about, what is the Chitalia? Have you reached there?
Yeah, we have.
Everyone who comes out of that place is like cursing. What should be the state in there?
Yeah, we definitely, using our legal aid facility, have been to many of these centers. Chitalia prison is one of those prisons we have visited. But you will not come across someone who is telling you that this is happening. They only tell you when they are out of the prison, and that is the unfortunate thing. We have not had cases of people or prisoners inside the prison who tell you that we are being mistreated. You only hear these cases when someone is out of the prison, and that is still a challenge. But of course, we are interested in knowing whether these abuses actually continue, and we shall continue to engage in some of these fact-finding missions.
Okay. Don't you think when, of course, I suggest when you're going to these particular places, you notify the authorities? Don't you think
that is a matter of practice.
Hey. Yes. Don't you think they somehow have to clean up something?
Yeah, cleaning up tends sometimes to be one of those unfortunate developments when you're visiting a prison. But you have no choice, because one on the other hand, you can't visit unannounced or unnoticed. So you have to still go there with permission. Whether they do some of this cleanup exercise or not, that remains a big issue. But what is important is that this prisoner, once brought to court, should be able to allege accordingly, because he has a right under the Human Rights Enforcement Act to allege, and the judicial officer has a duty to look into their allegation.
Okay. How often do you interact with these people who detain them? Mostly the police, you can say, and all that.
Almost on a daily basis, our teams are out there. They are in prison, trying to assist prisoners. They are at police stations. As I speak, many are in court. They are representing, of course, different prisoners. So it's a daily occurrence.
Okay. Have you tried to address to attempt the issue of drones?
Drone. Those illegal arrests, we have spoken out against them. We are aware of them, and we have spoken out against them. And we seem to, it has become a very an unpopular vehicle altogether.
Yes.
But they are normally arbitrary in nature, and quite often difficult to point out unless one has told you this number. But if you read our report, let my people go. We released a report in 2020, Let My People Go. Now that report showed cases of people who were being arbitrarily arrested, and we pointed to that feature of drones. And even I recall that we gave examples of number plates of vehicles which one would say are drones which are used to arbitrarily arrest people.
Okay. Okay. Now, as the people fighting for human rights, is there cooperation between all these agencies to have one say about these illegal arrests and detentions?
The human rights community is very clear about this issue. Virtually in all reports of the different players, they have spoken to the need to adhere to constitutional and procedural guarantees. And definitely, whether you read the reports that we submit before the African Commission on Human Rights, the ones we bring before Parliament, by the way, if you recall, I think it was 2021, there was a parliamentary hearing on the state of human rights, and all the agencies that engage in this area of human rights did testify before the Parliamentary Committee on Human Rights about the abuses and the need to stop them. So we definitely have a unanimous position on this issue of arbitrary arrests, abuses, and the necessity to uphold human fundamental rights.
Okay. And how are you building trust to the people you are representing, majorly those who have been affected? Because somehow, somewhere, like you said, it is operating under the state's guidelines. So if somehow you fail to produce these people they suspect are detained or sort of, how do you kind of build trust with these people?
Building trust in itself is a process. And I believe whoever comes to us for assistance has trust in us. And many times when you secure the release of a prisoner, or you ensure that someone's right has been upheld, that person is likely to have more trust in you. But we have seen this going on. For example, we have quite a number of field officers. We have our legal aid office in Bushenyi, which works in Greater Bushenyi, in all the districts of Greater Bushenyi. That is Shema, Buweju, Rubirizi, of course, Mitoma, and Bushenyi itself. Many people flock our offices seeking for assistance. If you come to Kampala here at our offices in Zambia, people flock our offices seeking for assistance. Now, those who come to our office, in our view, our considered opinion, have trust in us. And when we secure redress or relief for them, they definitely have more trust. We also have outlying offices in Wachiso and on the island, Kalangala. People are being assisted. And the fact that they are seeking assistance, they believe in what we are doing. Of course, we need to do more, but sometimes we are constrained either through because of resources or personnel. But overall, we think that Ugandans have come to understand the role of human rights organizations and have entrusted the task of upholding them with them. Okay. And that's why when we speak out, when we raise an issue, and also trust can also be seen in terms of the partnerships that we have built across the board with government agencies, intergovernmental agencies, the media, and certainly other players. That reinforces the fact that this phenomena called human rights agencies is important in a country like this for the benefit of the underprivileged. Okay.
Still under trust. How is the process like? When someone comes and tells you, my person has been detained, my person is missing, what is the process like? How do you make sure they are patient, they are not on pressure?
Now, one thing you need to know is that you are looking at a legal process. And it starts with a complaint being made. Someone comes to you and lays a complaint. You listen to this person. You have to adduce as much information as possible from the person. You need particulars from this person, and then you agree in principle that you will take up this matter. You have to establish the credibility of the allegation, because sometimes it may not be credible. Some could be hearsay, so you need to point to the existence of facts that lead you to conclude that this matter must be taken up. And once you have concluded, then you initiate an application before court, which you file before the relevant court, depending on the jurisdiction, and then the matter is heard, and the court makes an order, and under that order, if it is respected, the appropriate state organ or security agency will then produce the person in court, and then if the person is undergoing investigation, that will be clarified. If the person needs to be released, then of course you proceed with the legal process.
Okay.
Yes.
Under what circumstances is a prisoner or the people who are detained not allowed to see their relatives?
Generally, as a rule of the thumb, call it a rule of the thumb, they should be able to see their families.
Yes.
I think that's a general principle. Unless there are circumstances that would create some degree of insecurity if they were seen. For example, if you're a terrorist, if you are arrested on allegations of being a terrorist. Now, a terrorist may experience exceptional circumstances under which he or she may not be seen. However, generally, with the permission of the officers of the prison service or detention facility, it should be possible to visit any prisoner, including a terrorist.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the causes of them not being able to see their relatives?
The fear, sometimes the fear that they could be in touch with a potential terrorist, for example. You see, you could come as a family member, and of course, we may not know exactly what the connections are, your links are, and therefore, it may be important that they are really sure that you are not accessing this prisoner for purposes of perpetuating this particular crime. So those could be the situations. But as I said, as a general rule, prisoners are allowed and should be allowed to see their family members.
Okay. And in the circumstances when the people are fighting to have their families, maybe just looking at them, because I think we've had so many cases like that. How do you try to convince the person that you're not allowed to see your person?
No, you don't actually need to convince the person, because in most cases, these prisoners can only access visitors through the prison authorities.
Yes.
So it's the prison authority which will alert the prisoner that, you know what, you have a family member who wants to visit you. Now, outside that, it may be difficult because they are excommunicated. They are not in contact with the population. But overall, it is important that there is room for them to be visited.
Okay. But how many do you think? Is there any estimate, or is there a number, a specific figure of political prisoners we have here in Uganda?
I have no information to that effect, because as I said right from the beginning, who constitutes a political prisoner is an issue of contention. Because on one hand, one can argue that you committed a crime which definitely makes you liable for trial, and as such, you are like any other prisoner. On the other hand, for example, the opposition can argue that such a prisoner has been arrested and detained because of his convictions, his political beliefs, and as such, he is a political prisoner. Now, as who constitutes what is a gray area. What is important is, once you're a prisoner, you must access justice. You must be given room to be heard, and it's important that this is done within a reasonable time.
Okay. By the way, do you speak to the opposition as well?
Oh, sure. They even write to us. If they have cases, they do make them available to us. We also visit them, because as a human rights organization, we reach out to anybody who has a complaint, and as such, we have no barriers. No.
Very interesting. Dr. Livingstone here is doing us wonders, giving us light on what it means, what the justice for political prisoners and what should be done is what we are discussing here. And of course, he's really sharing interesting insights and what it takes and what it means to be a political prisoner and all that. But well, we are still continuing with this discussion after the short break.
Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Family TV, enriching lives.
When people die, they are good. A dead body is always good. He has done us good. We cannot replace him. There's no one who is replaceable. There's no one. But what can help you? It is to leave a good legacy that people will remember you.
Sometimes I share with my students a small story of an animal which normally is regarded to be the wisest, the hare. Once in a meeting of animals chaired by the lion, which was the king of the animals, he said that all those who are in the meeting and are not married should go out. This is for the marrieds. And then the hare put up a hand. I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Yes. What is it? He said, what about some of us who sleep like married people? Should we also go?
And may I say to those of you who are not yet married, determine what kind of family you want to raise. Because the family that you raise, the children that you get, you will either sink them or you will.
When you are sealed in the Lord, the devil looks at you and you are glittering. The devil locates a crown. For any person that the devil locates with a crown, the devil will never eat them because they belong to the Most High.
Friends, don't you give up in any form of hardship. Don't you give up, for Jesus encourages us and says, even at the point of losing your life, for the sake of Christ and the gospel, it is okay.
My dear brothers and sisters, let us remember that God is still reigning on his throne in heaven above. And let us trust in him. Let us rely on him. Let us pray each and every time. Let us not give up on showing ourselves out into the world that the Lord Jesus Christ is still king and he still reigns.
You and I are here to reign on the earth, not to complain, not to grumble, not to play victim, not to quarrel, but to reign on the earth.
I pray, Father, that you will release the fourth man to destroy every fire, to protect your people who are in every furnace and set them free in the name of Jesus.
This is Church of Uganda Family TV, enriching lives. Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Welcome back. You're still watching Issues at Hand here at Church of Uganda Family TV. And of course, remember, we are powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott in Entebbe. The numbers are there. Please go and reach out to them. Their services are top notch. Anyways, we are discussing the justice for political prisoners and what should be done. And of course, with me here, it is still Dr. Livingstone Ssewanyana, the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative, and also who doubles as the independent expert for the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. Very, very interesting, of course, very, very prominent person in this particular angle that we are discussing today. And in case you missed the first segment, please, you will want to look for the YouTube link so that you can follow what we were discussing or digesting here in regards to this particular topic. Now, Doctor, we are still reigning in this, and I now want to understand if you have taken the precaution or the measures to find out the well-being of these political prisoners, majorly their health, because they claim they are really tortured.
Yeah, the health of prisoners is important always, and indeed it's part of the package. When you're providing legal aid services, you also must be interested in their well-being. How are they being treated? And that's the very reason why we are always interested in prison population. We are very much interested in the question of prison labor. We are interested in the whole question of how they are fed and whether they have access to their family members. All these are issues that have a bearing on their health, and as such it's a critical area. So we always are interested, and we raise issues with the powers that be, that's the prison directors, whenever we conduct such visits. And it's important always to raise them, sometimes even in hearings, during hearing, to say, look, one of the reasons why this particular prisoner should be granted bail, for example, is that he or she is experiencing poor health, and there are chances that this person's health will deteriorate further if he or she is kept in prison. Recently, we had what are called plea bargain sessions in Mbarara and Wishenyi. And during plea bargain, you look at a number of considerations, and you say, well, this particular prisoner, much as he committed a crime, has been held for a long period of time, but looking at his health or her health at the moment, it's important and prudent for the judicial authorities to consider this factor as one of those that actually merits his or her release or reduction in prison sentence.
Oh, maybe. So as we try to gear up the whole conversation or sum it up, what have you done as human rights agencies or people who fight for human rights? What are you doing in this regard of political prisoners?
In this field of political prisoners, our concern is that they must access justice. That is our primary concern, and as such, we have invited family members whose loved ones cannot be seen to come to us, so that we can secure a writ of habeas corpus on their behalf. Now, for those who have approached us for legal assistance, we have also intervened on their behalf, and we continue to make a case that every person is entitled to some degree of freedom, respect, and at all times should access his lawyer, access his member of the family, and it's important that justice is delivered in a reasonable time.
So what challenges do you face while advocating for human rights?
There are very many challenges that we experience. One, being misunderstood. Quite often when you raise such a matter, you are also perceived as opposition leaning. You are sympathetic to the opposition. Why are you making a strong case for those people who allegedly are supposed to be enemies of the state? You can also be seen as an enemy of the state. So that in itself is a challenge, and it can limit the extent of cooperation and support that you may get. The other challenge, of course, is resource related, finances. Pursuing a legal matter itself requires some degree of financial investment, and that means, in essence, that you need resources in order, to visit the prison, in order to file a case, and also to pursue it, because it's not something you do in one day. It's something that can be protracted. So that in itself can be an issue. Sometimes officers may not be cooperative. Again, they need to be educated to understand that these rights matter for everyone, and even prisoners by themselves, by their very nature, they deserve these rights. So sometimes the cooperation may be, may not be forthcoming. On the other hand, overall, a culture of impunity can be a very big challenge. For example, if you file an application and it's not treated with the degree of reasonableness or degree of urgency that it deserves, that can also be a challenge, because the family member, on the other hand, will say you are not really providing the support. He expects, or she expects, that the following day this person will be released. And as you know, the legal process itself is very protracted. It takes a lot of interventions, it takes time, papers have to be filed, and on many occasions I receive calls from family members who have brought matters to our attention, saying, "Oh, how far have you gone with my case? My case is taking too long. What is happening? Can you do this?" And sometimes, because they don't know the intricacies of the law, they could experience some degree of frustration, and that in itself can be a challenge. So overall, one has to navigate that sort of environment in order to secure the necessary support or release that this prisoner requires.
Okay. Maybe I can ask, how do you go over these challenges in order to make sure there is justice?
Of course, like any other field or another profession or any other area of work, you definitely have to persist. You have to continue. You find ways and means through which you can, in a most cost-effective way or most affordable way, intervene. One way we have been able to respond to this is that we have our own in-house lawyers, legal team, and as such, it's much easier than commissioning external legal teams. So you have an in-house lawyer. You can also undertake a regular review to see how far these cases are going, but also explaining to this particular person that, look here, yes, you expect an answer tomorrow, but the answer is not yet forthcoming because of these intricacies, and this is what is happening. And sometimes they do understand, sometimes they face some degree of dissatisfaction, but overall, you try to navigate the terrain in order to ensure that some meaningful resolution of this matter is arrived at.
Okay. And what steps do you believe can be taken to have this issue addressed and maybe these people get justice? And because apparently we are just 1 year to politics again, to the elections again. Shall we continue like this? What steps do you believe can be taken?
The most important thing is for the state to realize that it has obligations to citizens, among them to ensure their safety and their security. And that any citizen who faces any wrongdoing in itself is an indictment on the state. So that in itself should be an important ingredient for any state organ to realize that it has a mandate, it has been mandated. If you look at the Constitution, all these agencies have been given mandates. They must uphold their duties as provided for, and they must carry out these in a manner that satisfies the public. So that's important. The other one we need also to address is corruption. Sometimes what derails this whole process is corruption.
Okay.
So we need to fight corruption. We need to make people know that they are, wherever they are, to serve humanity. And what they are doing must be a service. So they must not use money as a basis for providing the necessary service. So corruption also is an issue which needs to be addressed head on in order to improve on service delivery. Of course, overall, we need to fight a culture of impunity. The reason why we have this problem of political prisoners, as we have described it, is the fact that there are people who exercise authority that they have been entrusted with in an arbitrary and ungodly manner, and therefore we need to speak out against impunity, that when you hold an office, it is for the public good, and therefore you must provide a service. And if you are not fit for purpose, you must abdicate that office, and therefore the benefit of others. If we address those issues of impunity, corruption, and of course resource constraint, then we should be able to deliver an environment free of political prisoners.
Okay. How about the discipline during this particular period of elections, the discipline of the electorates actually?
Elections, of course, are periods that raise a lot of tension, not only within the electorate and the populace, but also the stakeholders. Now, during elections, of course, we experience high temperatures among different players. But if we play according to the rules, even then we can minimize those tensions. We can ensure fair play. You recall that after the elections in which Honorable Mama Mbabas was a presidential candidate, the Supreme Court came out very clearly on what needs to be done to ensure a level playing field for the electorate. Now, if those issues that were raised and those recommendations that were made by the Supreme Court are actually addressed sufficiently, then we should be able to reduce the temperatures. But there must also be a degree of honesty. There must be a sense of purpose when people go for elections. Why are you going for elections? Why should you victimize your opponent just because because of elections? Elections in themselves are only an opportunity and a space for people to choose who should lead them, and that means that people must be given the environment in which to do that. But when you have elections where internet is shut down, where people are not allowed to speak, where people are victimized, then in itself it shows that the purpose for which these elections are held is not necessarily for the good of the public, but for self-interest, and that must be minimized. And as much as possible, we should also adhere to the guidelines that are issued by the Electoral Commission, because during elections, the Electoral Commission comes up with very clear guidelines for candidates, for political parties, for the population, for everyone. It's important that as much as possible those guidelines are not only known, but they are also enforced and adhered to. Sometimes they are ignored, and that causes turmoil and mayhem. So we need to address that. Also, the media needs to understand the whole the tenets of a free, fair, and inclusive election, and speak out against those evils, and also be respected during that time, because we also see a lot of abuse against journalists during this election. So elections in themselves should not be an excuse for abuse of citizens. It should be a time when people reflect and choose those whom they feel should lead them, and that process must be honest, transparent, and peaceful.
Oh wow. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think every sector has been tackled here, be it the politicians, be it the voters, be it the media, be everything. So it has been really interesting for you to give us all these insights. Maybe briefly, your last remarks as we wind up this.
Just to thank Church of Uganda for having created this platform. I think it is worthwhile. And also viewers, to urge them as we head towards the 2026 elections to exercise some sort of due diligence in ensuring respect for the law, and for those who have been entrusted with public office to constantly be mindful of the fact that they are in there for a service. And as long as they are not delivering a service, they are doing an injustice to Ugandans.
Oh wow, thank you so much, Dr. Livingstone Ssewanyana. It has been a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we appreciate you as well for viewing and joining us since 9 a.m. And now that we have come to the close of this please remember, we're always powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott in Entebbe. Find time, go there, have the best services you'd want to get from a hotel. My name is Luke Majumba Linaitwe, and I wish you a lovely day, but also please stay on Church of Uganda Family TV for the rest of the programming.
Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
This is Church of Uganda Family TV, enriching life.